And now I'm working on exercise 13 to format the printing for a page, and then we'll use a web font in this. So the first thing we're going to do is open up, of course, the Samson.html, and we're also going to be using the speaker.css. Remember, that's the CSS that goes with this particular HTML, and I can see that by going up to the top and seeing which CSS file I have linked in my HTML. And now I'm going to look at a preview of what this page would print like. So I can do that in my browser just by hitting Control P and open it up. And it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look great, but it doesn't look bad. At the very least, it only takes, one page to print as opposed to 15 pages like some websites might. So it's not bad. But again, I need to do a little bit to fix it, I guess. So sorry, I don't want to be there. So let's get out of the print preview and make some changes based on what I'm told at the bottom of page 473. So in the style sheet for the page, we're going to add an at media print selector. So that's like we did before. First of all, let's go to the speaker.css. Do you remember back, well, you know what, if you haven't done it yet, maybe you haven't. When you're creating a responsive website, you'll want to have different selectors based on the media query. And the same thing is happening here, except that we're telling it it's when it's going to print. So it's not checking for the size, but instead it's just going to be for when it's using a print option. And that actually is going to be a selector or an at media selector that inside it has other selections or other CSS set. So you'll have rule sets inside this selector. So let's go ahead and get started. On 13.4, it gives us an example. It says in the book. So we're going to use this media query. So that is at media print, and it already changed colors. That's what I expected it to do. And then open up my file or my rule set. Of course, I can have a space between there like the others. That's fine. That space there is actually not necessary, or it can be there. It's fine. It's optional. That's the word I was looking for. And I'm going to have there. And by the way, we're using the external style sheets for our media queries. Let's see. I think that's all I want to say. Okay. And inside here now, I'm going to have more rule sets set. So let's scoot that over a little bit. Actually, it doesn't matter. It can be over there. Sorry. You guys can see it better probably that way. But I'm going to go ahead and do what it says in the book. So all it's told me so far is to open up this media print selector. And it does need to be at the end of the file. So just put it down at the bottom. And in fact, I'm going to give myself a comment here that says that this is the styles for printing. Just to keep myself a little better organized. Now inside this media print selector, I'm going to have rule sets for the body and some other rule sets, but I'm going to start with the body here because that's what's in instruction 3. So I'm going to change the font family for the body. So the font family for the body will be Times New Roman. Remember, I need to have it in quotes if the font has more than one word. And also remember that Times New Roman is generally easier for people to read in print, or a serif font is easier for people to read in print, but a sans serif font is easier for people to read on a screen. There have been lots of studies about that. So anyway, so Times New Roman, Times, and the default serif font, if that's not available. Change the width of the body to auto. Let's see if I can do that. There we go. The background color to white. So this one in particular, sorry, I keep hitting that. The background color in particular, you never want to print a dark background on a printer when you're printing. So always be sure to change the background color. And if that means that you also need to change the font color, then certainly do that as well. So the background color becomes white and the border is none. We're getting rid of the border there. Then on the top of the next page, there's more. Turn off the display for the navigation bar. So I'm finished with my body now, and I'm going to move into my nav bar. Do you remember what the nav bar was called on this one? So I can look up in my CSS, or I can go to my HTML, of course. I have an ID of nav menu on my nav bar, and of course, like I said, I can go to the HTML and see the same thing. So in my HTML, I have this ID nav menu, and that's where I can go ahead and and set off my display. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and open them up this way. So I have the Samson.html on the left and the speakers.css on the right. And let me go back down to the bottom. So now my next rule set is going to be nav underscore menu. And for that one, I'm going to set display none. I can do the same thing for the first heading in the aside as well. Let's go look at this aside. And did you know, by the way, that you can do, if I'm over in this HTML and I hit Control F, I can look for something. So for example, here I can type in aside and that will find the aside for me. Not that big of a deal here when we only have, 80 some lines, but if you had hundreds and hundreds of lines, it would certainly be useful to be able to hunt this way. Okay, so I also want to turn off turn off the display or display none for my aside first heading. Looks like my aside first heading is an H2, right? So I could make another rule set, or here I could just put in a comma and aside H2. That's the only H2 in there, so I can get rid of the aside H2, or I can do display none just by adding it to that rule set. Next, set the width of the section. Okay, so the width of the section to 5 inches. So I would never use inches if I were doing this on a screen. These really are only useful in print media. You typically don't want to use, well, not typically, you really don't ever want to use inches unless there's some really, really good reason to do it. We're also going to set the aside to the width of 2 inches. And the right padding. So remember, this is the section, this article part is the section, and these guest speakers are the aside. So we're going to set on the section the padding right to be 0. And in the aside, we're going to set the padding left to be 0. Okay, save that. Scooch this over. It should look the same. Nothing has been changed except when I hit the Control P. Oh, well, now that's significantly different, and I'm not sure that's exactly what I wanted, is it? Well, let's keep working on it and see where we go. Okay, next it says add other rule sets that are needed to get the print preview to look like the one above. So we're going to reduce some sizes, remove underlines, change paddings, etc., so on and so forth. I'm just going to keep typing away. I'm still in my media print selector, by the way. So now that I need an aside H2, I probably would go ahead and, whoops, copy that. There, and take it away from the selector. It's not necessary to do that, but most of the time I prefer not to have this multiple times if it means only one line. You're really just kind of adding to one line or adding to one line or adding one line. So you can kind of play with that as you wish, but either way should work. So I'm reducing the font size in the aside to 100%. So size is going to be 100%. Rule sets, key elements in the article, P and footer P. Set those to size 87.5%. Aside A, aside A. I want those to be I want the text decoration be none. I don't want to have those underlines. And their color should be black. And then finally change, I'm running out of space over here. Finally change the top padding for the P element in the footer. Footer P padding top 75M. And add a 3-pixel solid border. 3-pixel solid 93120. Remember, it doesn't matter what order I put those in for the border, as long as I get all of those in. Now let's save that and refresh and Control P and see what that would look like. Scoot that over. Well, that's not what I wanted to look like. I think I've done something wrong here. I'm going to go back and try to fix that.